Tournament Arc Season Finale. So, following up yesterday's video, we did get top 4. Top 8 qualifies for the qualifying tournament. This is a prize tournament, cash prize tournament. Very exciting. No longer playing for packs, we're playing for money. Anyways, so if you're interested, stick around, watch the games. They're all really great. These are very great players. One particular match that I really looked forward to was my rematch against Fluors. If you've seen the last video, you will know that this was the player that kicked me out of top 2 last time. So definitely have something that I want to prove out of this, and I hope you enjoy. So our first game is against SwipeRightPlease, and this game was really straightforward. You know, it's an MLB versus Shadows matchup, and generally speaking, in my perspective, Shadows have the advantage in this matchup because it does have the crit pressure, but it also has a higher base power and better draw power to draw into those PGs to shut down the MLB plays. Being able to set up multiple intercepts and play aggressively, as you can see right here, putting your opponent to 4 damage means that opponent using MLB, sacrificing their front row intercepts in exchange for that extra crit and power. It's hard for them to catch up and protect themselves in the next following turn. And here you can see that even with that aggression, I still have 3 PGs per hand. I'm not afraid of the MLB player, and I just finished off the game really quickly. On to the second match. Second match again, I expect our opponent to play MOP, and here I will stick with the Shadows because, as you can see for the first game, it was quite a good matchup. Things went really well for me since our opponent did not have the PG, and here I'm mulliganing away the PBO, looking to draw into more grade 2s to fuel the early aggression that went really effectively last game. But we did draw into the car, and that's alright, because generally speaking, since I'm going to play aggressively, I don't expect to be able to effectively hit my heals, and car does fuel my board for the PBD or PBO play, as well as just filling up the board to set up more attacks and hitting numbers in the late game. So here, let's take a look. Opponent checks a Leon, nothing particularly special going on here. Rides the Flustered Arc as it should. Considers playing out the Curse Lancer for the aggression, but this hand doesn't really justify it. It's the only grade 2 of my hand right now. And if it dies, then I don't really have any defensive options in the mid game. Opponent rides the Blaster Dark, which is a good thing. Riding a Blaster isn't necessarily a good play at this point of the game because Wingle Brave got nerfed. There is no utility of a Blaster unit on the Vanguard circle on grade 2. Also decay because, well, the Blaster Dark needs to hit. And also with the MLB 12k, 12 plus 7 is 19, which hits the PBO number. So definitely a good long-term investment in this game. Superior calling the full bow so I don't clog the board, the column spaces with the Babkar. Considering calling the second Babkar out, just to potentially superior call grade 2. Unfortunately not, that's a PG, but it allows us to hit the 3rd time if we hit a trigger. Here I choose to PBD because, as we said just now, the K does permit the opponent to hit our numbers, and we want to make our opponent invest more in the booster in the mid to late game. Unfortunately, our opponent does hit a trigger, a heal trigger in fact, which means that our second attack will not pass, and opponent hits a draw and a heal. So 3 triggers in a row, 2 of them are heals, definitely not going well for me. The early aggression tactic did not work out as effectively as in the first game. Opponent rides the MLB and searches for the Blaster Blade. Blaster Blade retires the Dark Dictator. Calls out the Blaster Dark. So this formation ensures that our opponent gets 3 attacks in, gets rid of the grade 3 as well without needing to attack it. We hit a draw trigger, but it doesn't matter because the MLB does hit 22. But this strategy empties up the front row, right? So the opponent is still vulnerable, especially since we are going to be at 4. We can still hit our heal triggers. Riding the PBO for the number, and then considering how I should place the Masquerade. Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter, except unless if I do consider playing out the PBO. But here, if I Persona Blast, I expect my opponent to have a PG. Putting the power on Karen means that I can still hit my opponent twice this turn if our opponent doesn't hit a trigger. But unfortunately, our opponent does hit a trigger again. 4th damage trigger in the damage zone in a row. Definitely very unfortunate. The aggression did not work out. There's only 1 PG in my hand. Not enough intercepts to protect me. Opponent searches for another Blaster Blade. The counterblast to retire 1 is so devastating. But opponent can also choose to use the Trumpeter, setting up more intercepts on their board instead, and filtering through the deck with the Blaster Dark. Discarding and drawing, because the 8 can hit 8, 9 can hit 9. And then investing a booster means that they can proc a PG or kill me. So that's a PG, so that's a relief to me. Opponent doesn't have 4 PGs. We've seen the opponent use 1 and 1 go to the bottom of the deck. So maybe there's a chance our opponent doesn't have any PGs left. We do top deck into the PBO, but we can't use it because we still have to hit the 2 intercepts in the first place. Considering calling out the Javelin, but is there a point though, is the question to myself. I can Counterblast to retire the Karen to retire the intercepts, and that's exactly what I do. There's no reason why to call the Javelin, because even if I hit 1 trigger, well, it'll be 11, right? If I hit 2 triggers, then it'll be 16, and the 13k is gonna pass anyways, since there is no extra crit, there's no Persona Blast, and so opponent's gonna be 17 minimum. 16k does not pass at all. Calls out 2 intercepts again. Remember that our opponent still has a Blaster Blade, so opponent is an impenetrable fortress at this point. Procs the PG and puts us to 5. No, they don't, because they damage deny and don't let us use the PBO skill, which means that we do have to bank on hitting 2 triggers, opponent not having a PG to win this game. Javelin being 6A definitely really hurt us at this point in the game. With no other options, we hit a heal, not proccing since we're at 4 and the opponent's at 5, but unfortunately no second trigger, and that's the impending doom. I don't think I have any heals left in my deck. Opponent has 2 crits anyways, well played, and I will lose here. Welcome back again to the 3rd game. Again, I believe my opponent's going to play MLB, especially since it went well for them last game, so they're more tend to bring it back out. And I'm comfortable with the Shadow versus MLB matchup. The last game just wasn't the game for me. Opponent hit like multiple damage triggers in a row. Again, I'm not giving away the PBO. Searching for PGs or grade 2s. Get more defensive options and aggressive early game options as well. We have the Javelin, which searches for the Blaster Dark, and we have the PBD in hand, which means that our right chain is practically complete. Opponent rides the Leon, and the end means, and not using the Leon signals to us that our opponent has most of their pieces, if not all of their pieces. And at this point, I just want to be really aggressive here. Calling out the Arian Rod, so I don't pull through draw. Rides the Blaster Dark, just like game 2. Uses the Liver Bill, hits the Ganslot, so that's basically a Blaster Blade. Here we go. Also the Trumpeter, so they want to be aggressive this time. We hit a draw trigger, which means that opponent will not pass at all, even if they do hit a trigger. So that's great. We have our Blaster Dark, PBD, PO, we have everything we want. And a car for fuel, preferably used as a heal trigger at this point. But we will discard the car, searching for the PGs instead. We see the Curse Master, and I do value the end flip. The Curse Master attacks, and we hit a PG out of our opponent, and that's great. Checking out all my options right now. Wondering why opponent misrided. If that's great. Music to our ears, right? You know, pulling out 2 Blaster Blades out without using the counter blast seems like a bit of a waste. Opponent seems quite desperate to just stay alive and hang on. But, you know, as you can see, the ride phase did not just skip. It actually did pause for a while, which signals to me that our opponent did have a grade 3, just chose not to ride, which I think is a misplay. Like, if you do have a grade 3, even if it's not the one you want, generally speaking, you do want to ride it. So here, seeing our opponent's desperation, I'm going to just kind of call out the car, you know, set up whatever I need. Like, I'm not afraid of my opponent. I do have a PG to fall back off if I need it. I will use the PBD here, get rid of the car. And the Arian Rod, discard 1, draw 1, seems pretty useless right here. Still in the back row, so our opponent does need to invest the booster to even touch our Vanguard. And here, I hope to hit a heal with 2 damage to 2, and if not, it will extend the lead to 2 to 4. Opponent hits 2 grade 1 units. Still haven't seen a particular grade 3 yet. See the ride chain? It's a long one. And opponent purposely skips ride again. That's a Ganslot. So I mean, riding the Ganslot isn't the best, but you know, you get twin drive, right? So the chance of hitting a trigger to draw into whatever grade 3 you want, or the pieces you want, or maybe even hitting another heal is likely. So here again, the single drive check doesn't really help. Opponent did not invest the booster, so it can't touch my Vanguard. I'm really sitting comfortably here right now. The 13k base doesn't even really matter since 11k my opponent can even touch. Pulling out the 10k here, saving the PBO for later. Just getting rid of the intercept. Since I'm at such a big damage lead, there is no point in rushing things. I'd rather just conserve my cards, make my opponent play out their cards and punish them, just grind them through the rest of the game. Again, a long ride phase. Opponent's still considering if they should ride or not, and still passes. Okay. I will have some criticism here. I think this is honestly pretty poor play on our opponent's end. Like, yes, it's been the 3rd turn, like, but this is like, you know, it's gambler's fallacy, right? Oh, next turn I will get my MLB. No, at this point you just want the twin drive. Here, calling out the trumpeter doesn't even help because I can just put up the Karen to kill the intercept, further minusing our opponent's board. PBO to threaten the PG or die, and we do pull it out. So the last card is a grade 3. Opponent doesn't have any options left, right? Just ride it. Yeah, that's the Palamedes. And 10 doesn't even hit 13, but they do hit a trigger, another trigger, so the twin drive does help. But at this point, it's a bit too little, too late. With a 10k base, my Masquerade plus Karen hits 20. And that's, you know, a number to get our opponent to 6. Our opponent didn't have any hand last turn, so I didn't expect a PG, but they did draw into it with the 2 draws from the drive checks. So opponent has 4 cards now, still has options, pulls out the Palamedes. 13k now actually is able to hit our Vanguard. Fortunately, nothing. We hit a heal, doesn't proc, doesn't matter anymore. 13 hits 10. Opponent only has so many PGs possible in their hand, and with 3 attacks, I think this will be game. Called the intercept comfortably, snatch round 1. So round 2, we meet up with a foe from our last video, Fluors, the winner of the qualifying tournament last time. So this is our rematch. Finally got a chance to take my revenge on him for getting me kicked out of top 2. Opponent plays the MLB. And last time I did pretty well with the Sprite Brothers, so I'm gonna bring that back. Checking how our opponent mulligan, since they did tap and draw with the Leon, wanted to see if there are any signals that our opponent's desperate or not. To consider Counterblast denying. Here, not considering using the Jelly Beans at all since we don't have damage anyways, and already have a ride target as we do have a Douglas in our hand. So we do attack since I do believe that our opponent isn't actually as desperate as they seem, just filtering for PGs or other pieces that they may need. Riding the Blaster Blade, using the Liberal, thinking, which means there are multiple copies of grade 3s in there, but adding the Palamedes to hand, putting the Gancelot back. So one of the weaknesses of Liberal is that it does force you to pick up whatever grade 3 if there is a choice. You can't say there is no grade 3, which you could with the TCG because it is hidden information. But here I choose to ride the 9K Douglas because I do want to take on some damage and enable my Limber Break earlier. Call the Douglas, call the Reckless Express. Here. Similar to the first game of the video, you will see that whenever I match up against MLB, I try to be really aggressive since our opponent does have to sacrifice front row, rear guards, generally speaking, intercepts in order to use the MLB combo. Here our opponent does ride the Palamedes, unfortunately, and taps and draws another Palamedes. But compared to the third game of this video, our opponent does reckon that, you know, having the Twin Drive is really valuable. Unfortunately, our opponent's Betty VA does not get the +3 since it is not a Blaster Vanguard. So here I'm on Dudley Emperor, calling out 2 intercepts because I believe trading will just net me value. I can grind through this game because the opponent's K can't even get the 7+3. Opponent has to put down units to beat me, and I do have the double draw triggers to supplement that strategy. So ride phase again, it's quite long, which means that our opponent does have grade 3 options, and that is Gancelot. At the very least, we know that that could have been a Gancelot. Could be more grade 3s in the opponent's hand though. Tap and draws the Blaster Blade. Very confusing here since they still have open counterblast to get rid of intercepts. Instead chooses to use the Trumpeter to filter through the deck. Calls out the Blaster Dart, of course, but puts it behind the Vanguard Circle. And calls up the Palamedes to attack. Confusing since they could have just called out the Blaster Blade and act as an intercept. So here we're at 3 damage. Our opponent's controlling our damage, not putting us to 4. Calling out the 2 grade 2s again just to set up the intercepts. Hit a draw trigger, which means our third attack will guaranteed pass. Opponent hits a heal though, but that's okay, since they're still at 4. Putting this attack in will put them to 5. And if our opponent gives us that 1 turn of Limber Blade, we can seal the game. So that's going to be a Blaster Blade. Camera wants to get rid of that. Black Panther. No, not using the Counterblast. Wants to damage deny us, but they're at 5 damage. So I don't know how long that strategy can last. Opponent does check a PG, which I will note of, since that means that our opponent has 3 PGs at most in their hand right now. I mean, there is only 3 cards, but you know. I'm concerned using the Jelly Beans, but not since we're at 3 and they're at 5. Not very necessary. Needs to call up the Medical Manager since my Vanguard is 11k and needs to hit the 12k number in order to proc PG. Uses Jelly Beans anyway to get the 6k booster so that my rear guards can hit without, you know, putting them back to the deck. The Jugs, 18k, Soul Blast 1 hits 23, which means that even if our opponent does hit a heal trigger here, we will still pass, assuming our opponent doesn't have a PG for the second attack. We have the heal trigger, which means we don't even need to use the Soul Blast skill from Juggernaut, and hope that there's no third PG, and that's exactly it. Alright, so we won game 1, definitely a good start against our nemesis Fluors here. Switching into the MLB, since I do think that he's going to switch into the Narukami, that deck did well for him in the last tournament, and definitely with the MLB being able to damage deny and disable the opponent's limit break options, very good in this matchup. So here, with the 2 Blaster Blades, 1 Blaster Dark, and 2 Starcoil Trumpeters, the condition for having 1 Blaster Blade, 1 Blaster Dark is definitely easy to achieve. So all we need is the MLB at this point. We do draw into the Ganslot. Considering riding to the Blaster Blade, since I might have to ride into the Ganslot, and it still would give, you know, the Ganslot something to do other than just sit there with Twin Drive. And unfortunately here we miss the Grade 3, not even a Palamedes here to help support our offense next turn. Calling out the Star Claw Trumpeter since it isn't very useful. I'm not going to be greedy with the Ganslot, I still want to ride. And here, if I hit a trigger and our opponent doesn't, then we can put them to 2. If not, then I can still attack the rear guard. Definitely still an alright situation for me. Opponent keeps the guard on the rear guard. Honestly, it makes no difference at this point. 8k to beat the 8k out. 14k is the Vanguard. Nothing. 8k is 8k. 16k is me. So our opponent's aggression tactic did work out for them. You know, they're at 1 damage, we're at 3. We do draw into the PG, which is great. Riding into Ganslot because I'm not very greedy in that regard. Still using the Star Call to deck them instead of using Ganslot skill, since the 2 crit doesn't really make a big difference right here, but the extra units do count. Want to build a 15k, so I do have the option of attacking up with the Vanguard to balance out the damage count instead of just hitting the grade 1 trigger. And yeah, we hit a trigger, opponent does hit a trigger, so we are going to be fine. We do draw trigger into the MLB, so we do have that option next turn. Opponent rides the Djinn, 14k Vanguard. Here with the side sheet, it's 19k, which hits numbers. The rear guard column is also 19k. So our opponent's definitely very skilled setting up the board for those numbers. We hit a draw trigger, but it's not enough. Opponent still is 19k, puts us to 5. We hit a heal trigger though, Ganslot does come in clutch. With a 2 damage open, we can use the Blaster Blade to clear out our rear guard. We do draw into another PG, so our defensive options are not too weak. Considering using the Blaster Blade here, and we will. 9k hits rear guard, 16k hits Vanguard, and our Vanguard will still hit with 22. Our opponent is 20 at max. And we can still activate heal triggers at this point. If our opponent doesn't have a PG, we just win, and we do proc the PG. But with the 12k base, our opponent will have a more difficult time hitting us. 60k does connect. Unfortunately, we have 2 PGs left over, so we will not be afraid of this attack. Opponent hits a heal, but they put us to 5 already. They're still at 4, so it does not work. We proc a PG, so this is probably going to be one of my last turns. So we draw into another PG, so it's great. You know, push out the KK, the 10k attacker. And unfortunately, right after this point, my video got cut since I ran out of space on my computer. But what you can see is that, you know, we attacked, our opponent had a turn, and we survived it with the PG. But as you can see, we drew into the Alpha. We still can use the Ganslot to search for the Blaster Blade to set up an intercept. Unfortunately, we can't counterblast 2 to retire the intercept to force out 3 attacks into your opponent's Vanguard. And calling out the Leon for the drop 1, draw 1 to reduce the count in the deck and hopefully draw into our last PG, but unfortunately not. 9k hits 9k. Vanguard hits, you know, nothing particularly much. I don't expect our opponent to have a PG, but they do. And then hopefully this attack wins the game, and it does. So right here at this point, we're supposed to get game 3. So I get matched with the last person in the 4-person block. Fortunately speaking, in our in block D, there was only 3 players, so we do get a bye each, which means that I get an auto win, free win for this 3rd round. So while I was waiting for Fluors and SwipeRightPlease to finish the game, at this point I have the best record out of the 3 players right here, since I did win round 1 and win round 2 and automatically win round 3. So I will be moving on to the next stage. So moving into top cut, our opponent glãssesguy brought Shadows, Spikes, and OTT. And I found, you know, MLB and Shadows don't really have a particular good matchup against OTT or Shadows itself. And so I decided to bring the Spike Brothers as the most comfortable matchup against all 3 decks in this case. So here we have the grade 1, we have Jelly Beans to fetch for a booster or a grade 2 intercept, and we have the Deadly Emperor being ride target, so that's great. The opponent does have a more optimal setup with the Medical Manager intercept Soul, so their plays won't be too limited in the future. But, you know, everything's alright. We draw into another Panther, and ride into it. It is a 10k base. The 9 plus 5 hits 14k numbers, so as long as we both don't hit triggers, it will still pass. Yeah, I do play it out. Checking no trigger, and our opponent checks no trigger. The Dudley Phantom on both of us, and our opponent checks a second manager. So things are going pretty well for me. Can maintain that little aggression here. Our opponent does get the Devil Summoner skill activation to get the Reckless Express, setting up a 16k call. So similar attack pattern to me, 2 attacks this turn, but since we do have an intercept, it stops one of them from hitting our face. Damage checks the PG, which is unfortunate, but not very big of a deal since the game is won or lost based on how you use the Dudley Emperor in the first place in this matchup. We search for the PG, afraid of losing any more. Search for the Douglas, the SP1 of course. And we battle. Since we're at 2 damage, our opponent's at 2 damage, the heal does proc with the Jelly Beans. So putting that back is alright. And not overextending since we don't have any boosters at this point. And here, I'm already reconsidering, wait, was the search for the PG the right play at all? Like, should I have searched for a booster or Reckless Express or something? But in my opinion, since we don't have a PG at all in our hand, it is a safer play, but definitely not the worst play possible. But just a draw trigger, we check a heal trigger, and unfortunately since our opponent was at 3, and we were at 2, it doesn't proc. There's no reason to rewrite the Dudley Emperor unless we want the 1 soul, which we don't really need at this point. Pulling up the 9k since 9k hits 9k anyways, and the 10k intercept number doesn't really play too big of a difference. And here we do want to enable our opponent's limit break 4. Oh, but unfortunately the opponent does hit the heal trigger. We want to enable the limit break 4 since if they use it first, then that means we will get to use it. And since I am lacking in units, I definitely do want to get some units on board. And since we're at 3, we're comfortable with taking 1 or 2 hits to the face. And if we do get a trigger, then it probably stops the aggression for the turn. So here our opponent has a lot more cards in hand than we do, and as such can set up boards to attack face twice. And here this is our limit break turn, drawn to another Dudley Emperor, definitely not very important. But see, this is the part where not having a Brocky or Juggernaut Maximum or not even having a booster really hurts, since that means that I can only superior call 1 proper column and can attack 4 proper times only in this turn. Coming back to Grade 3 since it's a dead card anyways. Douglas here, since I do have 2 counterblasts, I don't want to call up the Douglas and save those 2 counterblasts for the second Dudley Emperor if I do have that chance. Opponent doesn't check a trigger, it's the PG in fact, which is a good thing to us. Hits the heal, but since we're at 5, they're at 4, it doesn't proc. Juggernaut, that's an SP Juggernaut, that's spicy. So the Juggernaut attacks, breaks the intercept, the Juggernaut attacks, breaks the intercept, and then we have no options at all. We have 1 PG, but we can't take 2 attacks. Even if we hit a heal, opponent can hit over that heal number with, either a Stone Blast cost or a Counterblast 1 cost. Exactly what they're doing right here. Opponent also hits a heal trigger. Definitely no way out of it. I think it's pretty much game over at this point. So moving on to game 2, it is a Spike Brother mirror match again. Since our opponent was comfortable giving us the limit break 4, I am comfortable bringing it back out. And our opponent, just won with it, so they must be pretty happy with how they played. Here we have 3 Jelly Beans, and we do want to search for the Grade 2 option, so we don't have to ride the Bracky. Press the Medics Manager again. Soul charges the Juggernaut this time, which is, pretty good, limiting our opponent's multi-attack options. Draws into the Douglas. We ride the SP Douglas, especially since this is the one that we searched from our deck. So it is already information that our opponent has, which means that it's better to just use that copy. So our opponent doesn't know that we have an extra 1 in our hand. So Juggernaut draws into the Dudley Emperor. So great, we actually have a ride target now. We don't have to ride the Juggernaut Maximum. Perfect. Devil Summoner into Devil Summoner into Braki. Absolutely disgusting. The Jelly Bean searches for Douglas. So our opponent's considering, whether or not to invest on their board to enable the attacks this turn, and they do. Since we don't hit a trigger, the 7+6+4 can actually hit us, but sacrificing the Deadly Phantom, of course. But using that skill means that the opponent's Jelly Beans are more active, since they do have the extra Deadly Phantom search. And here 15+4 or 15+5 does hit, and if I were my opponent, I'd rather keep the intercepts, since I am putting the Spike Brothers player to 4 damage, which means their Limit Break is enabled. Having the intercepts to block 2 of the attacks is definitely important. Jelly Beans here, if I hit a heal, it's definitely going to proc, so just gonna spam the Jelly Beans. Search for the booster, since the booster does enable me to hit the numbers in the first place. Pulling up the Deadly Phantom, Braki, and the Juggernaut. Considering pulling out the Douglas, so I can set up a full proper board on the left column. And so yes, I do call the Douglas on the right column instead, saving my soul, especially since I didn't get the Medical Manager ride. So there's only one soul after all, so I can use the Jugger in the first place. Saving the Jugger though for the next turn, since now I do have 2 soul, I can use the Recklessness first and the Juggernaut if I choose to, and I do hit a heal trigger, which is great. The attack to the face definitely passes, and then this attack also definitely passes. So the damage count is back to a balance, 3-3. Opponent rides the Juggernaut maximum, misses the Deadly Emperor ride. The Devil Summoner procs again, gets the Reckless Express. 14k does allow it to hit. Searches for the PG, calls out the Douglas. 9 hits 9, 14 hits 10, 11 hits 11. Pretty straightforward. Here our opponent, enabled our Limit Break, but does hit a heal, which means they're back to 2, we're at 4, but we do hit the Jelly Beans as well, so we're at 3, they're at 2, we can't use Limit Break. They can't use Limit Break, in the first place they are on Jugs, not Dudley. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm considering moving the Reckless Express into the front just to attack the 7k instead of 7k, since I am at 3 damage only. Calling out the Jugs, soft taunt here. Not using the skill. 11 hits 11. We hit the 3rd heal trigger in this game, putting us back to 2 damage. Our opponent to 3 damage. Also a PG, which means our opponent's defensive options are lackluster at this point. That's the General Cypher. Pulls out a full board, not using General Cypher to its maximum capacity. Does put the Braki back into the deck, so you make space for the Cypher. But luckily, the opponent does hit a draw trigger, calls out the Deadly Emperor, which means that they can't hit the Juggernaut maximum, but they choose to hit the Vanguard instead, hitting 21k. Completely forgot about that since the Deadly Phantom can do 6+4. So here we're at a little bit of a pinch. We're at 5 damage, even though we did proc 3 heals, and our opponent is still at 3. So I do want the Vanguard attack to hit the opponent's Vanguard, not wasting an attack at all. So we do Juggernaut to the rearguard, put in the dead Grave Tree from our deck to the soul, from our hand to the soul. Considering if I should call the Braki or the Douglas or the Panther, calling out to 2 Panthers instead. We hit a 4th heal right there. That definitely lets us hit our 2nd attack, 3rd attack. Opponent's at 5. We know that their opponent does have that PG since they did search 1 from Mecha Trainer. Anything more than that is just naturally drawn through the game. Opponent's on General Cypher, which means that, unless our opponent's willing to sacrifice a front row rearguard circle, our opponent can't promote damage aggression in this turn. Calls out 1 Douglas, keeps 1 card in hand, so if they do hit a trigger, which they do, then they can hit the second intercept right here. The 11 can hit the 10, and then the Douglas column can hit our Vanguard, bringing us back to 5. We do hit a draw trigger though, enabling us more attacking options. And since the Braki can go back to the deck after hitting a rearguard, we can enable, multiple proper attacks to our opponent's face here, even while hitting numbers. Our opponent's at 5, so it's either relying on PGs or heals. Getting rid of the dead grade 3, setting up 2 Brakis, so then I can still hit 21 or 20 without a trigger. Now we can hit 25 or 26, even if our opponent hits a heal, but that will be game. So quickly moving to round 3, I did shift into Shadow Paladin since I do believe our opponent is going to stay on Spike Brothers, and again, the 13k base on Vanguard does help mitigate the effectiveness of the W in return. Our opponent does again get the medical manager ride. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that at all in our games, but very fortunately, our Javelin ride chain does work. We have Javelin, we have Blaster Dart, we have E. Opponent does take a PG to the damage zone. Very, very good, since we do apply quite a bit of crit pressure in this Shadow build. We do hit a draw trigger. Opponent does drive check a PG to clock the deck, so that's 2 down, 2 to go. But the SP one, of course, got a flex. Pitch the PD since it is a dead 10 unit. Calls out the Blaster Dart, so then I can hit numbers. Assuming we both don't hit triggers, but I do. That means that even if our opponent does hit a trigger, our Blaster Dart Reaver will still pass. If they do hit a draw trigger, that's alright. We are at 0 damage, our opponent's at 3 damage. Definitely very content, especially since our hand is still quite full. Opponent searches for the PG, shuffles it, so that the PG at the bottom is, could be no longer at the bottom. Pulls out 2 Brakis, uses them defensively, which is definitely music to my ears. It means that opponent's multi-attack options are more restrained right now. Opponent does hit a jelly even though the kill trigger hitting up to 2, but we are still at 1 damage, especially since hitting a draw trigger right here. Definitely really comfortable with this scenario. Ride for PvD, of course. Calls the pullback to the bottom. Calls the card to the right column. And calling the main. Ditching the Blaster Javelin. Draw 2. Hit, and hit face. Here I'm comfortable keeping a card in my front row since I am, after all, still at 1 damage. Our hand size is really impressive, 2 PBOs, which means that I can use the PBO skill on demand whenever I desire to. Pulling out the W Phantom into the front row, which signals to me that opponent doesn't have a lot of grade 2 options, or just wants to take up the damage straight to the face, so then they can start using the Deadly Emperor Limit Break. Does pull out the Juggernaut Maximum to the front row. Hitting numbers. Snap roll. Riding to the PBO, 13k base. Definitely very valuable. Here, getting rid of the car, since we do have 2 intercepts in our hand. Would rather have those on the board. Using the PBO, since we do know that our opponent did Mecha Trainer into a PG, which means that the PG will proc. And attacking first with the Vanguard means that if we do hit a heal, it will activate and heal us 1 damage. If we attack with the Reaver first, it will not work that way. Considering attacking Juggernaut, and our opponent does show a PG, so I am comfortable with going all in face. Opponent does hit the SP Dudley into the damage zone, draw trigger, that's fine. In hindsight, the PBO retire should have gone to the Juggernaut maximum, since if our opponent does hit the defensive, we can still attack into a Deadly Phantom, and this way we disable quite a few of our opponent's multi-attack options. But unfortunately, that was a small misplay on my end, and that might cost me the game. Who knows? And at this point, our footage will get cut short again. Opponent does do the multi-attack, setting up multiple plays, putting us to 5 damage, and unfortunately, at this point, I couldn't recover. and that was the end of this game. So here, unfortunately, since we did lose the last round, we are going into a fight for third place again. So last time, if you've seen the previous video, you will know that I did lose this round. I got fourth, and that meant losing out on 5 extra packs. So this match is for, it's a money fight. It's for $5 for third place and nothing for fourth. So definitely don't want to go home empty-handed after spending so much time on this. Playing the Shadow, since I did expect the spike twice. So we did get the Javelin Wide Chain, which is definitely great, but did not get the PBD. The opponent searched for the Reckless Express, I believe, with the Mech Trainer, which is a bit reckless. But I like that. That's a bit of attitude, and definitely more of a confident play. Like, oh yeah, give me the damage. I don't have PG. Show me what you got. And here I use the Javelin to search for the PBD, calling out the 8k Charon so then my main can hit, and then my Vanguard 10+6 can hit. Putting our points at 3. Very similar situation to last game, and we all know how awfully that went. Off camera. Devil Summoner does not proc. It's just a Jelly Bean though. 7k does hit the main, so definitely can't attack without a booster. Calls out the Douglas, calls out the Phantom. 11k hits Vanguard, hits the kill trigger, which means the opponent will hit no matter what. It's another kill trigger in a row, 2 heals in a row, doing the damage against my favor right now, putting me to 3 and opponent to 1. So this is our PBD turn. Probably call the car, so then I will use PBD here, so then I can catch up in terms of damage. We know that our opponent doesn't have a PG, which is vital in making that consideration. Should I push now or push later? Without the PG, we're much more comfortable with doing that push. Going for a face, so we got rid of the intercept. And we have the Lancer to hit our opponent's Vanguard and flipping 1 damage to enable future Crown Blast plays. And here we put our points with 4. With our opponent's limited hand size, we're alright with that, since our opponent does have to invest reverse and hands to use the Lee Emperor. But unfortunately our opponent does get 2 draw triggers in a row, making that issue entirely. Having 2 Brackies as well, definitely not a very funny moment for me. But you got nothing to do but laugh. Bracky again. Chooses not to use the Bracky to conserve the soul, and chooses to build 1 perfect column, so the second attack to base does hit. Hits the kill trigger and another draw trigger. So at this point I'm like, how many triggers did our opponent see? That's pretty ridiculous. Puts us to 5, opponent's at 3. Successfully activated 3 kill triggers, couple draw triggers casually there. Need the 13k base, so our opponent does need to invest something to hit us with the Vanguard. I'm going to pitch the Javelin, since it has less utility right now than the PBD. Another PBD right here, pretty dead card. So I do want to go into my PBs. There aren't a lot of options anymore, so just go ahead and draw a PG. That's pretty good. We also have the PBO in hand. So which means that we can still apply the crit pressure, disabling our opponent's limit break. If not, they will be at 5. And that's a PG top. We have 2 intercepts here, 2 PGs, so we should be fine, right? Unfortunately, that also means that I don't have any options for the next turn. And that is going to be very unfortunate. So here, our opponent's still at 3. We don't have Counterblast anymore. We don't have any intercepts anymore. 1 PG isn't going to cut it. At most, we can put them to 5. But that will be game, Drawing into that card definitely was not something I was looking forward to. But, that's how the game works sometimes. And I don't see any heals left in my deck, so I concede. Alright, moving on. Once lost has been lost, let's go change the pace and let's play some spikes here. Didn't expect our opponent to stick with Spike Brothers, but fine by me. It's a mirror match after all. It's just whoever hits more triggers or plays better wins the game. Now the Reckless Express 7th. Not using the Jelly Bean since we don't have any damage in the first place, and we do have multiple grade 2 options to ride. Opponent does get the next manager. First, the Panther. It's a heal trigger. Doesn't kill anything, which is great. Wasting that first heal, as well as a tutor. We draw into the PG, which makes me comfortable with not using the Mecha Trainer here. Riding the 9K. Considering pulling out 9K to enable more aggression, but here I choose not to. I want to instead be able to use the Lemon Break earlier, as well as stay at a relatively higher damage count to enable my Jelly Bean heals over my opponent, and hopefully that efficient play will snap me the win. Opponent does search for the Reckless Express again. They're going to call the Reckless Express in the back row anyways. I don't know if it's necessary to use it right now, but I guess it does filter the deck of one card, which means hitting a trigger is likelier. So we search for the PG since we are at a higher damage count. And we set up a column right here. Hitting the trigger means that we will guarantee to hit 14 times 14, and we're going to be fine. We're at 2, our opponent's at 3, so we're still, we're ahead in this damage count. Not exactly what I was looking for, but, being able to put our opponent to 3 is great because it enables more aggressive options on the next turn. Other than just putting our opponent to 4 at the end of turn, it could mean that we put our opponent to 5 at the end of turn. So here we did hit a damage trigger, and opponent gives us the 4th damage, enabling our Lemon Break. Unfortunately, we do hit the Jelly Beans. Don't even know if it's fortunate or not. Unfortunately, we can't use Lemon Break. Fortunately, we're at a lower damage count. Let's just go with that. Closing out the 2 10Ks as a shield. Focusing more on the defensive plays, keeping the brackets for the offensive plays next turn. We hit the draw trigger, definitely very nice to see, but unfortunately would have rather hit the Jelly Beans, which we did draw into our hand. Put our opponent to 4. That's the 3rd Panther we've seen wasted, 1 soul into a damage zone. So our opponent definitely doesn't have a lot of grade 2 options left in the deck. Juggernaut, and then Braki, and then Lemon Break with Dudley Emperor. 5 attacks a turn is definitely very aggressive and very threat. Putting the dead grade 3 into the soul, as you should. Also the 10K and the Douglas. Not using the Douglas, which I agree with, because if they use it, then that would mean that the opponent will be unable to use the 2nd Dudley Emperor unless our opponent does hit a heal trigger. And we do hit a heal trigger, which means that the next attack does not pass, and we are at 4 damage. We use the Jelly Bean since we're both at 4 damage, and searching for the booster isn't that bad of an option. I'd rather put the Phantom into the soul rather than the Douglas into the soul, since Douglas still can be tutored as a grade 2 intercept unit in the front row with a 9+5 in the front row through the Dudley Emperor. So calling out 2 Douglases since we don't have any Panthers anymore, and I'd rather keep the Brackies as an option. Counterblasting 1 since we do have 5 Counterblast and we still can take 1 more, so we can still enable Lemon Break if our opponent does push back. Counterblasting 1 means we can hit numbers as well. With the 15+4 we can proc out 1 PG, putting the Phantom Knight into the deck, and then the 25K column can also proc another PG. So our opponent only has 1 card left, does still have the 2 Reckless Express, so they can still enable the Dudley Emperor Lemon Break while getting rid of the opponent's intercepts, but opts to use Double Summoner, which means that our opponent does set up the board, pulls out the last card in the hand, Douglas, and unfortunately since our opponent doesn't play crits, this will be the end of our opponent's line. But our opponent does hit a heal trigger, which means that they're back to 4. At the same time, the 1 damage means that our Lemon Break is enabled. We also did draw into the 3rd PG, so our defensive options are definitely not weak at all. Devil Summoner into Reckless Express, one of the rare times the Devil Summoner actually worked in my favor. Check out my deck for what grade 2 options I do have. And since we do have 2 Brackies, I can put the Recklessness Rust back to the deck and call out the Brackie. Here I'm considering calling the Phantom to boost the Brackie that would have been called out if I used the Reckless Express, but I thought there was it was not really necessary. At this point, I would rather build up the one proper column, as well as set up, an extra circle, filter through the deck, and that should be good enough. The draw trigger. Opponent hits a draw trigger, so hopefully our opponent doesn't draw into PG, and they don't, and that will be game. So last match, Spike Brothers seems to have done me well so far, so I do choose the Spike Brothers. Opponent chooses to play the Shadows in order to counter the Spikes, which I believe, is the right train of thought. Has the Deadly Emperor in the hand, so I'm comfortable with going to 4. Rides the Reckless Express. Again, not seeing the Medical Manager at all today. Uses the Jelly Beans since I don't want to ride the Brackie. Opponent misses the Ride Chain and gets the Karen instead. We get the Juggernaut draw into the second Douglas. Draws into PG. So since we did draw into PG, I'm definitely not too uncomfortable keeping the Mecha Trainer on the board. Not going aggressively, since if we do give them 2 damage, riding a Blaster Dart would allow them to sank the Mecha Trainer, which is not a very great situation. We may drop and draw 2. The Curse Lancer, obviously on hit on flip 1. The domain won't hit numbers at all, but will be there to intercept. Definitely still have utility as that roll. Ride the Deadly Emperor. Considering if I should use the Mecha Trainer. But since I do intend to use the Jelly Beans, healing a counterblasting damage is definitely value. At this point, I choose not to. So here I choose to be more aggressive, deal more damage, hitting numbers, instead of using the Mecha Trainer to for PG. Is that the right play or not? If the opponent did ride into PBD, it means that they have to -3 to kill the Mecha Trainer. But our opponent missed the PBD ride. Or instead opting for the PBO, which I believe is the right play. Getting rid of the Mecha Trainer is important. But unfortunately did call up the PBO with the card, which means that their Persona Blast opportunities are lower. Did hit the card in the drive check though, which means that they do feel more damage, and sends PG from my deck to the damage zone. Close the Medical Manager before putting the Jelly Beans so that I don't accidentally soul charge the Jelly Beans. Calls out the Juggernaut as a soft taunt and allowing us to hit numbers, saving the actual intercepts for the mid to late game. And then Juggernaut goes face. We do have a PG just in case our opponent does have the PBD Persona Blast. Here the main box gets rid of the dead 10k PBD. So doesn't use the Persona Blast, doesn't have the Persona Blast since Thinking Sense didn't come up. So I'm comfortable. We're at 4. Opponent puts us to 5. We do hit the Jelly Bean though, so we're at a comfortable position for damage. We have a Juggernaut in the front row, a Juggernaut in the a Juggernaut or a Brackie on the left column. We can put them back, search for intercepts, set up a next attack, and also have 2 triggers back to back. Very, very nice. So I'd rather put the Panther back in since the Juggernaut can still go back to the deck. Having a extra trigger into the deck, as well as being able to hit 16k number, enabling multi-attack as well is definitely useful. Hitting the heal here, very, very big. So we're at 3, opponent's at 5. Opponent showed 2 PGs right here. definitely a very uncomfortable spot for the Shadows player. Opponent calls out 2 grade 3s into the front row, demonstrating that they don't have any options anymore. Is there a Persona Blast? There is. And if this passes, it puts me to 5, but at this point, it doesn't really make a difference in the game. Opponents have 5 damage, not enough PGs, not enough heals in the deck to help them. And even if we can't use the Lemon Break, we can still hit the numbers that we need to hit over heal triggers as well. Hit the draw trigger. Don't even need to Soul Blast the Braki if I don't need to. Opponent does have 1 PG, and even if our opponent hits the heal, we can still use the Juggernaut skill even if we don't have the trigger, and that will be game. Welcome back. I'm sure it has been exhausting, just like last video. You must have watched the entire video, of course. These fights were really long, and I did speed it up this time, but not by 20 times, it was 8 times. So the viewing experience is more comfortable, gives me more time to commentate as well. These games, there were only 4 games, but they were all very, very intense this time around. We were playing for money, not for packs. It's really nice, get to play with some players again, play against Fluors, you know, get to match up against them and get my revenge. And also just overall a really great experience. You know, the tournament was handled really well. Everything ran really smoothly. Everyone had really good respect with each other, played well. And I do believe that it is really worth a chance to join one of these tournaments, you know, especially, you know, check out MKWA, they do a really good job. Because yes, the ladder experience or the tournament mode, champion mode, you know, yeah, you're getting to play the game, but you're not getting to play, you know, at a very, very competitive level. Like, you don't get matched with people who also want to actually play competitively, and you don't get to play best of 3, so you don't get to test your strategies outside of that single game. You want to check your consistency, you want to know your matchups, you want to know how to play against the meta, you know. So definitely very valuable experience if you do intend to get better at this game. If you're interested, check down the description box down below. And if you do top, you get to win a lot of nice prizes like packs or cash money, and you know, packs are nice, but money is also nice, you know, can't complain. So I guess this is the end of this video. If you did enjoy the video, and if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe, you know, down below. Actually, the button's down below, not here in the video. And if you did like the video, do hit the like button. If you do want to see more of this kind of content where Entropy does try to join more tournaments, dissect his plays here and there, do let me know down in the comments below. You aren't all very active in the comment section in these videos, I see. Maybe the videos are too long. Tell me, you know, oh, should I just focus on commentating on one particular match? Maybe that's better for the viewing experience. Let me know down below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.